All right, let's play a little game of good news, bad news. Good news is I had said this was kind of an experiment to see if people still cared, and they definitely do. So Neighbors Again is a thing, although it's not going to be nearly as regular as the business podcast I do with Hayden Shaw, the consultant and the millennial. You can search for that wherever you download audio, wherever you download this podcast. That's out every Friday, every week, no matter what. And Neighbors Again is a little bit different animal right now. It's something I'm still committed to, but I'm not putting it out on a certain day every week, no matter what. So the good news is it's back. The quick summary, if you don't know the story, is I did this podcast as a way to have civil conversations in increasingly divided America, and then I got too busy running a business and being involved in 4 other podcasts, so I had to let it go. I went to delete the whole thing, and I realized that 600 people had downloaded it in the last couple months, even though I hadn't put out any episodes since 2017, so I decided to kind of do a little experiment to see if anybody still cared, and you do, so it's still here. So that's the good news. The bad news is that somehow it's some kind of audio issue here that got resolved right around minute 26. So if it bothers you, just skip forward to that. If you can get through it, there's some fantastic stuff in the first 20 minutes. All right, let's do this thing. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. Let's be neighbors again.
And if we can't walk in love, we're a noisy little gong, a bitter little song that a bully sings out of key. And if we can't walk in peace, we'll forget about the least of these. A mother crying on her knees for a boy who's locked away. There's a voice calling me.
All right. Well, this is the most unique way I've booked a guest. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. This is Neighbors Again. Brantley J. Brown joins me. I guess, and you know, it's funny. I actually don't want to say the name of it's your fiance, right? Your fiance's company, because like they're kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's not say that, because that company gets a little crazy. It's a company that's leaked or has been accused of leaking people's information, and yet they don't like their name put out there. So I was on a tech support call for like 2.5 hours, and you know, working out a we'll say computer issue, and then basically you and I wound up meeting up because when you're on the phone with somebody for 2.5 hours and you're waiting for everything to reboot, you just talk about anything because, you know, it's a long call. So
right.
Here we are. I want to set this up. I'll give you, I think I gave you the 10-second overview, but I'll give it to you, and just in case anybody listening, you know, this is the first time or they found you. Neighbors Again is based around the idea that, you know, media and society is becoming increasingly polarizing. So I just try to grab people from wherever, talk to them about their perspective. Politics is probably better viewed as a grid. Authoritarian, libertarian, liberal, conservative. I, on the test, wind up pretty close to center. And so I try to have kind of all different kinds of people on, and that's why it's called Neighbors Again, because you used to actually like talk to your neighbor, and we don't really do that anymore. So we got to find another way to not just have your life be an echo chamber. Not you in particular, just everybody. So you're a screenwriter. Actually, I probably want to land at the end. Like, probably where we'll go is we'll talk about the film you're working on. Because I don't know if I told you this, but I'm actually I do some writing as a film and TV critic as well.
Yes, you did.
So we'll start with Roseanne, and we'll end with your film, and we'll probably go somewhere else in the middle. That's okay. Okay. So is it okay if I just read your statement here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So it's funny you wrote it, but I'm reading it. But okay. I cannot help but categorize the complete cancelization of the Roseanne show as an overreaction. Not to mention the loss of syndication for the old episodes. Can I pause right there? So, you know, you're out there. You probably know a little bit more about this than me. I have a friend who was briefly on Prison Break for like 6 episodes, and I know he gets paid every year. Do you know what syndication rates are for the average sitcom?
I'm not 100% sure what they get from it, but from what I'm understanding, it helps keep people afloat. Like, say, you know, because Roseanne was 30 years ago, you know, people still make money, a good deal of it off of it. Yeah. So I know that up until the reboot, they were probably counting on that.
Yeah, well, and Roseanne, I think I read she's made somewhere between $40 and $50 million in her life, supposedly. I don't think DJ, who was a child actor, probably put down that kind of cash. So the rest of the crew, I mean, obviously John Goodman's made a lot of money, but I'm going to keep going. There are many people involved with the show that deserve none of what's followed the infamous tweet. I can't justify or condone what Roseanne says or does, but on the flip side, I can't find any justification on the damage done to the rest of the cast and crew, and that's coming from a very openly gay liberal Democrat. So we'll get into it right there. Did you? I didn't read through all the comments. Did you get any pushback on that?
Not a whole lot. But I noticed that as soon as the tweet happened, social media blew up. Twitter, Facebook, and everybody was asking everybody's opinion. They were having these polls, and and I did comment on a couple of other pages, and I did get pushback there.
Okay.
Basically, it's not even so much pushback because of the tweet itself. I find that there's actually just a big pushback because if you like Roseanne, you're stupid because she's a Trump supporter. And that's where most of the pushback comes from. It's not actually about the tweet. People have had a problem with her since way before this.
Yeah, and did you watch? So I don't know how old you are. Did you watch the show as a kid, or did you?
Oh, I did. I grew up with it. Yeah.
You grew up on it. Okay, where'd you grow up at, man?
Southeast Missouri.
Oh, okay. Oh, where?
45 minutes south of Cape Girardeau, about 2.5 hours south of St. Louis.
Okay, so I grew up the river at the corner of Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the original setting for the show was in Polk County, Illinois, which is a county up and a county over. And I remember as a kid, and you probably felt this. Think back when you're watching TV when you're 8 years old, and it seems like every sitcom in the 80s and 90s was set in New York, right?
Right.
I mean, to me, that might as well have been science fiction.
Yeah.
I couldn't relate to it at all. I mean, I've been to Chicago, I've been to Kansas City, I've been to St. Louis, but the people, even as a kid, the adults I knew didn't talk like that. They didn't work those jobs. It didn't. It just seems so far removed. And then Roseanne comes along, and it's actually set in, a setting I understand. And then I think what people don't understand about the legacy of the show is, I grew up in the second poorest county in the state, and it's maybe the only sitcom or one of the only ones I remember where the family talking about money and being strapped and trying to figure it out, as opposed to we're at some, exclusive restaurant in New York City and then something funny happens. The waiter drops the food or something.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why, when they announced that they were bringing the show back, God, it seems forever ago when they first made that announcement. I think it was last year. But I remember just being so excited because it's, it is nostalgia, but the show was the only thing that I can remember that was as close to an accurate representation on TV of my life. And for a lot of people's lives, who grew up lower middle class.
Yeah.
It was very realistic, but it was funny, and it didn't make you feel less than yourself when you watched it because you are in that same situation. Yeah, okay, so you struggle, but life goes on. You have your family. You survive somehow.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I was really. Did you watch any of the reboot?
Yeah, so I got the Disney login for the first 3 episodes, and I was planning on watching the rest of the season. I think there were 7 more. I just hadn't been able to get back to it. So real quickly, I'm in the first year of starting a business, so that takes a lot of my time. And I do some writing on the side, and then I do some some podcasting, which I really care about. So it's funny. You probably get this. Most people don't. I'm like, I just don't have that much time to watch the kind of TV I actually want to watch, as opposed to what I probably need to watch if I'm going to keep writing. So it just hadn't fit in the schedule yet. Did you finish the first season?
Yeah, it was the one thing because I live here with my husband AJ, and then our friend DJ came with us from Tennessee, and he's known AJ for years and years and years, and I got to know him after getting with AJ, and he's more like family than friend.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, it's interesting the conversations we've been having about the Roseanne controversy right now because he's a very black man. And he's not at all offended necessarily by it. He's kind of in the middle. He's like, we have conversations with each other just because we don't think about it, where if anybody on the outside looks at us and be like, oh, you're racist. I was like, no, but that's just the way we talk to each other, so.
I was thinking about that, and I wound up untagging my, one of my like post-college roommates. I untagged myself from a photo just because, I'm doing I do some things in the public sphere, right? And so he was actually adopted from India, and he was a teacher, and horribly, he got called a sand N-word by a student, and he was like, I'm from India. Do you know where that's at? That's like 3,000 miles from the Middle East. And so, to be funny, we wound up getting him a camel-shaped cake for his birthday. And it was funny. He thought it was hilarious. Obviously, we weren't trying to be mean to him. We made jokes about it all the time. And, he made probably, just as cutting jokes about me, in different ways. And it was fine because we had the context that, we knew each other. You know what I mean? I probably wouldn't make that same joke, at somebody on Twitter and, and not think there wouldn't at least be negative blowback. But there is this weird thing where people, as Mr. Kanye West has obviously been in the news as well, on his third album, he says, I'm on TV talking like it's just you and me. And we enter this thing where, social media is refreshing because it was that. And then there's also this element where we don't maybe remember all the time that it's also a public broadcasting forum, So if we're talking it's just you and me, and do I think what we did was racist? He didn't think so. I didn't think so. But would I probably put that out on a public forum? Probably not. That's why I want to tag myself.
Yeah, definitely. It is kind of weird how things have transformed in people's lives with the presence of social media, in the sense that it makes us so transparent. And that's not always good. Because we may say something, because I've done it before, in the heat of the moment, I am so passionate about something, and I just go ahead and, boom, put it out there. Without thinking.
Yeah.
And then I feel really, oh, God. And then that's a quick delete. But, and I think it's worse in the case of comedians, because comedians are always trying to push the limits. And it used to be that it was done in their stand-up shows, not so much on their television shows, because, there are rules and regulations. You have an audience that you have to make sure that you don't alienate. But, you always see those video clips of comedians doing stand-up, and they say horrible things about people. But it's okay because they're comedy. It's in satire.
Yeah.
But when a comedian puts it in written form, nobody sees the joke that she says she's trying to make. It just falls flat, and it comes out very xenophobic and racist.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that it's not such a good thing for, celebrities sometimes to try their practice on Twitter and on Facebook and things like that, because some things are better left said. It's the connotation of it, and if it's a joke, you have to deliver it in a certain way. And then I honestly think that this whole tweet thing was meant to be a joke, but it came out very wrong.
Yeah, according to, at least from what I heard on Joe Rogan's podcast this week, she was saying that, I do. Sorry, there's three pieces here, and I'll let you respond. The first piece is that. The ambient thing, people are making fun of that, and the drum maker said, one of our side effects isn't racism, which is really funny. But on the flip side, the ambient thing is real. You are,
yes.
I've never taken it. I've never had. I sleep like the dead. I've never had trouble sleeping or whatever. I'm gonna turn my mic up just here a bit, man, because I notice I'm a little low. Is that better for you?
Yeah.
Check. There we go. Okay. So I do think that's a thing. The second thing is Roseanne Claims, and I can certainly understand this. I didn't know who Valerie Jarrett was. I follow politics probably a little more than most people. I didn't know who she was, and I looked at her picture, and I probably wouldn't have guessed her ethnicity, because she's half Middle Eastern, and she's half black, and she probably, genetics are complicated things. I have a half Asian cousin who looks Mexican. She looks a little more Middle Eastern, and saying someone who's Middle Eastern, looks like what did she say, an ape or something like that. I mean, that's still rude and in bad taste, but as somebody pointed out, who was it? Did Colbert or somebody? No, it was Bill Maher said that Trump looked like an orangutan. And, so if that's what you thought you were doing and not engaging in historic racism, I think that's, something else. And then the third thing is, I feel like TV networks know what they're buying into. So Samantha Bee, who was also in trouble this week, you knew that's what she was. And so I'm not really for protesting or, for trying to knock any of these shows off the air, because we keep doing this eye for an eye thing, and there's going to be, blank cable because there can be nothing left.
Right.
But, Roseanne has talked about her struggles with mental health and, being on medication and that type of thing. And ABC knew what they were getting into. I mean, she's talked about it, and she said she went back and begged and asked that this thing could be reversed. I feel like it's also sort of like somebody who's dating somebody who's, way overspends on money or something like that. And then they get married and oh, well, this person spent a whole bunch of money. And I'm like, but you knew what you were buying into. You got married.
Right.
So that would be my thing is this whole oh, she's the most evil person ever. She's really sorry. It does seem like a mistake. And also I feel like ABC knew, they knew what they were signing up for. They made a ton of money. They got the #1 show on television. And then they acted oh, we had no idea she could act like this. I mean, she's clearly not been well at different points in her life and has talked about it.
And they must have forgotten what it was like the entire run of the original series, because she was always in the tabloids doing something so out there and making all of these comments. There's plenty of print media that probably still exists that you can find, even on the internet. You can find anything on the internet that's going to tell you that she's no different than what she was back then.
Well, there is this outrage thing where, when Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather were going to fight last year, people were oh, well, it's never gotten this bad. It's never gotten this negative in, boxing before. Okay, when we were kids, Mike Tyson, in one press conference, said he was going to rape a female reporter, rape his male opponent, and eat the opponent's children. And everybody's kind of oh, okay, he's Mike Tyson. He's crazy.
Right.
So, if there's a high water point for when things got the craziest, it's probably that one. And this whole oh, we've never seen anything like this Roseanne thing before. I'm I think you have. I mean, I think the one guy from Seinfeld got super racist in one of his stand-up acts, and that's not out of syndication.
Yeah. And, and then you think about these things, and even though I am not big on censorship in any shape, way, or form. I don't think that you should burn books. That has happened in the past when people didn't agree with what was in them, and I don't think that you should shut people's TV show off because of something they say personally. Even though, yes, they are a public figure, the show didn't say it. In fact, her show in the current reboot went miles to present both sides, and in fact painted her character in the show as someone who, yes, has these fears, is slightly xenophobic. She has Muslim neighbors in one episode, but then by the end of the episode, she changes her mind about them. She comes to their defense and sees them as people. I'm in the, sorry, can I get in there for a second? Oh yeah, please.
And again, I mean, I'm writing, I'm in journalism. I've had times where I had an editor pick a headline that I felt was way more extreme than what I actually said in the article, and I also get that editor is responsible for traffic. So that happens, but I've seen these headlines of oh, well, why would we should be surprised by Roseanne? These hot take type articles. She was xenophobic against Muslims in the show. I'm oh, so I hadn't seen that episode. So in the beginning and in the end, she changes.
Yes.
I mean, that's a very different thing.
Yeah, it was actually, I watched that episode because I was nervous about where it was going, because I was oh my God, you picked the worst possible way to play this character. Because she really was. I mean, she started off the episode, they're talking about she's peeking out the windows and she's they've got so many bags of fertilizer in their yard. They're going to make a bomb and they're going to do this. And I was oh God, how's she going to fix this in this episode? But by the end of it, when they're in a grocery store, after they meet, at the other house, and they talk a little bit and realize, oh, well, they're just people. They're not scary. And in fact, the Muslim says, you scare us. We have to keep a baseball bat by the door because we don't know who's coming to our house and what they're going to do. And then a checkout cashier at the grocery store severely insults the Muslim wife to the point that Roseanne basically gives her hell. So, I mean, she ripped her to shreds and basically told her job was on the line. She's talking to the manager right now. She even paid, and it all started because it was a whole thing about welfare. The Muslim woman's food stamps weren't enough to cover her items. Roseanne pays for them. Okay. And then the woman tells her, she says, oh, would you want somebody to help you take your groceries out to your camel too? And I was like, ooh. But yeah, Roseanne completely rips her to shreds, comes to the woman's defense, tells her, people like that go through things that you will never understand in your position, and, basically tells her she's stupid. That's why I'm like, nobody's really paying attention to most of her social commentary. She's always talked about different races, different sexual orientations, and she's always been very inclusive of that. That's weird. That's why everything's shocking me so bad now, because one thing happens and suddenly everybody forgets how much she has actually fought for equality for a lot of people.
Well, and, I was thinking back on 80s and 90s TV and what she did, because she has a brother and a sister who are both gay, and she introduced gay characters who weren't like just a living punchline. Because I think back to, and how old are you, man, if you don't mind me asking?
33. I'll be 34 next month.
Okay, I'm 35. So we had almost the exact same, experience or whatever. And like, I remember TV being, like if there were gay characters, they were there to like, to take the punch of the punchline, right? And thinking back even to school and like sports and stuff. I mean, it's not like I didn't know gay people growing up, but it was like, it's not like a coach would ever yell at you for saying like the 3-letter F word, right? At somebody, and like at the time, I don't think anybody thought it was a big deal unless there was somebody who was gay there. And later, I found out there was a gay kid on my soccer team, and years later, I'm like, oh man, I wonder what we said that that probably didn't need to be said. But in that environment, Roseanne was doing something like pretty flippant countercultural, and she gets like no credit. I mean, like, no credit for any of that, because now we live in this like outrage culture thing where the only thing is like to like kill your career. Like whoever it is I don't particularly like at that point, like I want to kill their career. When you're talking about censorship, it essentially is a form of censorship, and like, well, I can't defeat you on ideas, so I'm going to defeat you on being offended.
Right. And even though I didn't necessarily agree with the imagery, I'm sure everybody remembers the Kathy Griffin picture with the head. I remember seeing it and I was like, oh God, that's in poor taste. But I didn't expect her to get the backlash that she did over that, honestly. Well, because I was just like, okay, yeah, it was a poor choice, but it's not the first time an artist has made a very poor choice in the public eye, But it does seem like lately, in the last couple of years, everybody is so ready to attack everybody else. Yeah. They're just looking for a reason.
Well, and that kind of comes back to the thesis of this show, that there should be some places where people just come together and it's not a big deal. It's just relaxed, because it used to be, you could, I'm just rattling off a couple of things, right? Like, you could invite, the people in the neighborhood over to watch the Oscars or the NFL on Sundays. And now those both really can't happen without maybe some really uncomfortable conversations in the room.
Oh, God.
And so some things should just be entertainment, so that it doesn't turn into this whole thing of like, well, I've only met you the first time, but let's talk about policing issues. And it's just like, okay, not that that's not important, but if you're trying to like be friends with somebody, that's probably not the place to start.
Yeah, no, definitely not. In fact, it's almost to a point we have little talks before we have little get-togethers, and we're like, nobody's talking about politics, nobody's talking about this. But it's kind of unfair when you think about it, because there's so much that we tell ourselves we're not allowed to talk about. because you don't know what's going to happen now. There is no safe conversation. Not anything real, not anything that is thought-provoking. Most of the time you have to have very flippant conversations just about, lighthearted. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I like having deep conversations and really picking somebody else's brain. Even if it's something they don't agree with me on, I don't judge people for that, because that's what makes the human race so great, is because not only are we all different colors, different sexual orientations, but we're just different people.
Yeah.
No two people are going to think exactly the same. Even two people who agree on something, you most likely have two different viewpoints on that same topic. So,
yeah. And I think that winds up surprising a lot of people. Is like, I've got a couple lines. The first line is, it's really important for me to surround myself with not an echo chamber. And then the second thing is like, I'm always sort of de-networking. And that, like, when I find out, like, if you're the kind of person, and I saw somebody say this on social media recently, I tried to make friends with this person, then I found out they liked Trump. How could they do that to me? And I was like, well, that's one way to look at it. And the other way to look at it is, maybe just be friends with them.
Right.
This is obviously a pretty heavy place to take it, but, maybe one of the reasons I've never had problems with Muslims is my brother, as he was dying of cancer, was cared for primarily by a female Muslim doctor. And so, but you never get to those common places of humanity if you like see the bumper sticker or see the yard sign or whatever, and you're like out already.
Right.
I would say that you should have discrimination in who you hang out with, but it should not be over points of view. It should be over character issues. So, right. Like, if you lie or you come over to my house and you, like, steal Xbox games every time you're here to resell to buy meth, like, we can't hang out.
Yeah, I would think that would be a no-go.
I mean, I don't know. I was trying to pick something pretty extreme, right? So, I do believe in, having discernment or judgment about who you hang out with or who's in your life, but it should be over what kind of person someone is, not just because they see something different than right now. Because what's interesting about politics is, like, things that hills we're sure we're going to die on at the moment in 75 years are going to be judged by kind of, the general public very differently. Mm-hmm. And things that were like a huge deal, that we were sure on, like, in some ways may even become like a non-issue or something like that eventually.
Right. Yeah. Everything. I mean, if you look at the way that the world runs now, 20 years ago, we would probably be, just going nuts to imagine how things are right now, and the way that people react to different things. I guess that's why I always say, people say, well, it's just because you were young. But no, I honestly do believe that things were so much simpler when we were younger, because people didn't worry about some of the things they worry about now.
Yeah, and they you have access to so many more gruesome details whenever something goes wrong. Like, I think about the biggest flood in United States history happened, Galveston, Texas, like 2,000 people drowned or something like that, right? 1900. Okay.
Yeah.
You maybe found out about it in some cases 2 weeks later in parts of America. Most people don't realize, like, one of the reasons we got it great when other people didn't is Spanish flu killed more people than World War I. There were whole towns in Virginia that were gone. I mean, like 100% death. Virginia got it pretty bad for whatever reason, right? And so, but you maybe didn't find out, and especially like, we're from not that far apart. There are still people who are living way back in the hills that only got to town, every other month to buy supplies. Maybe they never found out.
Right.
So they had different worries. They had to worry about cutting enough wood to make sure they were warm in the winter, but their imaginations weren't going to these crazy places about, like, what about the floods? Do you remember when we were kids, man, the killer bees thing?
Yes. I was always hearing these, but it would come out like, you didn't get it like a constant, news flash about killer bees are coming. but you heard about it, and it seemed like, the killer bees are making their way into Texas, and they're moving up.
They're coming up.
And of course, in that, I want to say, at that point in time, then all of a sudden they start making all these killer bee movies.
Yeah, I know. They were made for TV, and they still. That's kind of a funny transition into into screenwriting and stuff like that. Like, there still are celebrity biographies and stuff like that, or somebody has a moment, it's like the pilot that was able to save the life of the rest of that Southwest flight. After that woman got, halfway sucked out the window, and tragically died, and the pilot was able to get the plane down. Everybody was okay. I was just talking to a pilot about that. He said that people how you don't have to listen to the announcements anymore. You can just put headphones in and ignore, which I feel like are so antiquated. It's like, who doesn't know how to use a seatbelt? Did somebody just leave the Amish way of life and take a flight like their first day of? I mean, that's the only way you could know how not to use a seatbelt.
Well, to be fair, there are some people who still don't know how to use a seatbelt in a car.
Well, and that's what this pilot said. He said half the people put the oxygen mask on wrong. They didn't put it over their nose. They put it down on their chin. And if the plane would have dropped fast enough, they all would have passed out. Which wouldn't have killed them, but,
Right. But...
So I was like, okay, so everyone is dumber than I thought. We'll transition to kind of the deeper message of screenwriting, but it's funny, those Killer Bees movies and stuff like that. These people have a script done in, or when they're trying to do, a royal wedding knockoff movie. These people have a script done in, 10 days, and they're just, whatever, go for it. Get it done. Put it on Lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I swear it was premiering within days of the royal wedding. I had no idea they had made one so fast. There was already that movie that came out about Harry and Meghan Markle.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a movie? What?
Well, it's like
they're just getting married. It's not like they've done any life-changing things yet as a power couple, or But
yeah.
Okay.
Well, hey, they capitalized on the hysteria. They moved. I mean, from a business stance, I suppose they moved quick to get to market, and whatever. And the rest of us can just laugh at it. So
yeah,
let's get into the writing thing, because you're writing in the horror space, right? Is that pretty much exclusively where you're camped out right now, or do you do you kind of have script ideas in other genres as well?
I do have some. Primarily, it's horror, and that's just because it's always been my favorite genre. My father was that kind of dad who never really listened to my mother when it came to TV choices for me. So, I mean, even though it would be frowned on today, but way back in the early 80s and mid 80s, I was mid to late 80s, yeah. I was watching Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all of those movies. So I grew up on it, and it just kind of became... that was why I decided I wanted to write, because I was like, I want to scare people. And I figured out I was good at writing, and so it just kind of turned into the screenwriting thing. But I have gotten some ideas for a drama. I'm even talking to my writing partner, Michael Colomb. We wrote a screenplay together last month for another feature film.
About Harry and Meghan's kids when they have the first one. You've already got it going.
Exactly.
No, sorry, what was it on?
I wanted to do a TV show about a gay son and his mother who grew up in a small town in the Midwest, but he's moved out to California. But after his father dies, he kind of swoops in to save the day, and he brings his mother with him out to California to kind of get her mind off of things. Uh-huh. Slightly inspired by my life. My father passed away from cancer last May.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was very quick. He had stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer.
Okay.
I guess it's one of the most aggressive and common types of lung cancer. But yeah, basically within a month of we found a spot we think you might have cancer to, yep, it's definitely cancer. He was dead. So it happened so fast. My mom was, lost. She's like many women in that social setting. You depend on your spouses, and normally it's the wife really depending on the husband. And it was very much like that for many of the years that I was growing up. So when Dad died, she felt lost, and I wanted her to come out with me to California, just to get away.
Yeah. And
I thought it might do her some good, but, she's not ready for it yet. But the idea came in my head, this could be a TV show. I do that all the time. Even the most tragic circumstances in my life, I cannot help, but eventually it comes into play as work for me.
Yeah.
So now, we're going to be working on trying to develop an idea for a pilot for a show called Mending Fences, and Michael Klum's going to help me do that. And then I've got a dramatic movie I want to write, and then I've got a dark comedy, so it's a little bit of horror and comedy mixed together. So I don't want to just strictly do horror, but it'll be my main thing. I kind of want to be like Wes Craven used to do. Wes Craven did all these horror movies, but then he started to branch out and try to do a few different things.
Well, and I feel like it's I want to camp on a couple things. Is the TV show, I think that's really fascinating. Is it a comedy, or is it a drama, or is it kind of walk the line between the two?
It's going to be both. And it's so early on in just the thinking about it. It was never originally my intention to ever want to try and develop something for TV. I like movies. But we had the table reading for another script I had written, Chuckles. And one of the actresses who's there was also a producer, and she was talking to me about television and how there's really great money to be made there, and if I had ever considered it. And so I got to thinking. And then I started to develop this idea, and I talked to Michael about it, and he wanted to help me. So we haven't started writing anything yet because we've got so many other projects going on. But it's just something that we kind of have in our development slate.
Yeah. No, it's funny. When you were rolling out the idea, I was thinking that the character that's loosely autobiographical would go home. I don't know. That's just where I went with it.
Yeah, but he does go home.
Yeah.
The idea is that he's going to go home and he's going to stay for a minute, but he talks his mom into taking a vacation with him back to California, sunny California, far different from, the middle of the country, where he lives with his husband. And in this story, whereas my mother is actually very okay with me being gay and has been for a long time, in the story, for dramatic purposes, the idea is that the parents and the son haven't really had a great relationship for years because he's gay. And then when the father dies, he comes in to try and salvage a relationship with his mother, and so he brings her home. And so it's about a small town woman with very small town views and what it's like living in such a gay enriched environment. Mm-hmm. Her son's gay, he has a husband, and in California it's a very openly gay state. Nobody looks at you weird for walking down the street with your boyfriend here, holding hands. So
yeah, well, I mean, I'm just outside of Chicago, so it's like the same thing. And I don't know what your experience was, because of like how we kind of tend to stereotype bigotry. I don't know what your experience was, but part of my extended family's from Laos, which is a small country between Vietnam and Thailand. There's a bunch of Laotian refugees that came in. I mean, still some of the people that the parents of the kids that was best friends with, I mean, barely speak English, and there's actually a growing, in rural America, there's definitely a growing Hispanic population. And then, oddly enough, there's also kind of a big chunk of Nigerian immigrants who will work in meatpacking plants because it's such terrible backbreaking work. Most people don't want it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look at that, and I look at what I see in Chicago, and I would say I see far more quiet, kind of racism and comeuppance in Chicago, even though it's super diverse in some ways. In other ways, it's we're diverse or whatever, but I stick with my own kind. It's we're not racist. Well, even the European immigrants of different, whatever's have kind of, it seems stick to themselves. I don't see a lot of Greeks and Yugoslavians hanging out up here.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe that was not your experience. As far as how you felt growing up, I don't know.
Well, when I grew up, there really wasn't much diversity in my town.
Yeah.
I think in my growing up in high school, In my class alone, I think we had 2 African-American students, and that was it. And 1 Asian who didn't stay the full time. They transferred out. So we didn't have a very diverse group of people, though I was actually very aware that, there was a much bigger, varied world outside of East Prairie, Missouri. But as far as when I grew up, there wasn't a chance to divide.
Yeah.
And in fact, we used to joke about it because one of the girls, Tamira, I remember we always used to laugh because she was the whitest black person. And that was how she described herself, because that's what she grew up with. I mean, it was just kind of funny. So everybody just nobody looked at anybody differently. They were just, we all hung out together. They were usually, both girls were always everywhere everybody else was. So,
yeah. Well,
so, I mean...
Yeah, and I grew up in a town of 50 people. My family's farmed the same ground since 1830. And these two things have nothing to do with each other other than just like, just from my own experience of like, are people, small towns bigoted? There's a guy who got out of prison who happened to be gay. Who moved to the town because he had some family there. And he robbed several people and left. And the thing is, like, I think even after he robbed people, probably most people in town would have, like, let him move back in and, like, been pretty nice to him. Because, like, they're just kind of like that. Like, the thing about coming from an economically, pretty tough spot is, like, you get a lot more community where you're willing to help people and it's not so tribal because you just got to, like, growing up on a farm, like, when podcast is called Neighbors Again, if you don't have your actual neighbors... like helping you, like you're gone, the bull gets out, the bull gets hit by a semi, you're out several $1,000s, maybe now you can't pay your bills. That's a pretty big deal, right? And the only thing that's going to stop that is having a relationship with your actual neighbors. And I'm not saying people in Chicago or LA or New York or whatever, I'm not accusing them of being like horrible bigots or anything, but you do get a different mindset especially when you kind of get some more money and all of a sudden, your friends are moneyed, established people who live in certain neighborhoods, and you only hang out in those neighborhoods. Like you kind of, I think it's a little easier to maybe see the world through a little more discriminatory lenses at that point, as opposed to if you're just blue collar and just trying to make it.
Yeah. It's part of the reason why I'm a little leery about ever moving into Los Angeles. It's because everything's so fast paced. There's so many people, and I feel like there's this common goal, and it's also just, it permeates the entertainment industry. A lot of people are just out for number one. And I live about an hour and a half outside of LA in Bakersfield, which is still a big city, but not as big as LA. And there does seem to be a little remnant of the small town that Bakersfield used to be here. Our neighbors talk to us. We live in this good little circle on our street. We can talk to our neighbors, and it's very friendly. And I don't ever want to let go of that. Even as I go further and further into making movies, I don't ever want to feel like I get into a role of self-importance where I can only be around certain types of people, because I like being able to mingle with everybody.
Yeah. Well, by the way, have you met Korn? Are they still out there or no?
I have not. Okay.
Well, the band Korn is from Bakersfield. And then I don't know, Merle Haggard, who was really important to me growing up, and who died just a couple years ago. His son, Ben, has a very similar voice, and he's kind of being like a cover band of his dad or something.
Oh, yeah.
And so the Bakersfield Sound, like that was a big thing in country music. That was pretty influential. So that's just the two things I think about.
There's a whole drive here, Merle Haggard Drive.
He was when Johnny Cash recorded Live in San Quentin, Merle Haggard was in the audience.
Oh, really?
He was in prison at that point, yeah, for robbery. And he got out, and he never committed, never became a career criminal. He got out and changed his life and stuff. But yeah, that's the heritage of Bakersfield, man. But I love what you're saying there, because I've been out to LA, and I'm not a big enough deal that I get many offers to get flown out to premieres and stuff, but it does happen. And I love Southern California in a lot of ways. I love Orange County. I love the stuff between Orange County and San Diego, in particular, all those little towns. but the whole LA thing, man, like it is just, it's tougher, but you can still make it in the entertainment industry and just opt out of the whole system. Because like Matt Damon lives in Florida, and he said the paparazzi just quit coming around when they realized he just wasn't going to do anything exciting. It's like, I go to the grocery store, kids go home from school, we make dinner, not throwing a vase at my wife, there's nothing to report on. So they just left him alone. And like, in a lot of ways, if you don't engage in the behavior of trying to make them pay attention to you, like, you can be super successful without having that. And sometimes I think that means physically staying a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's good whenever you're a screenwriter because you're not out in the public eye most of the time. Most of what you do, it's behind a computer at a desk. And then occasionally you come to set and you go to your premieres. But for the most part, nobody's paying attention to me, and I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Not that I don't want people to know who I am, because I want to build my brand, and, but I want to have a good name. But I don't want to be one of those people that I can't go walk my dog down the street without people being like, "Oh, look, take a picture." Yeah. I like some sort of privacy, so that's why I feel bad for actors.
Yeah, well, on the flip side, though, like, because AJ's from Tennessee, and you've probably been out to Nashville and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. One of my friends tells me he sees Carrie Underwood at Walmart by herself like 4 times a year. And if she doesn't make a big deal out of it, maybe somebody will ask for a picture or something, but nobody else makes a big deal of it either. So, like, you kind of have to be... I guess there comes a point where that's not true, right? Like, I don't know what it's like to be George Clooney. But for the most part, like, unless you're one of maybe the top 20 most famous faces in the world, if you don't make it a big thing, you can walk around. The thing is, like, the whole, like, oh, the paparazzi are chasing me and they want to track my every move. That's often because, like, you leveraged it to get to where you're at, and the sword swings both ways. Mm-hmm. It cuts both ways. So it's like, well, that's also what you owe your career to.
I know the one things that I look forward to, being around all of the other geeks, the ones who are really gonna know what it's like, because for me, I know so many things about movies. I grew up not just watching, because the advent of DVDs,
commentary
there
tracks.
were special features, yes, and I would spend hours watching the movie again with the commentary, and then I'd watch all the behind the scenes stuff, and I really wanted to know what went into it. So I love going to conventions, and I've been to Monsterpalooza in Pasadena in April. It was so fun talking to some of the directors who had done all of these classic horror movies and the actors and stuff like that, because I didn't approach them like, I didn't fangirl.
Yeah.
It was more from I was like, oh my God, I love your work. And when you did on this, and you created the Michael Myers mask for this movie. And, it was, I geeked out, but in my own way. And I like being able to talk to people like that. And especially when you go to conventions and stuff like that, then I won't mind if people come up to me and go, oh my God, you wrote this and it was so good. And I love, that's fine.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I like having a career choice where I can just walk around.
Yeah.
And nobody would know me.
Yeah. Well, and very few people, like, I'm one of the people that would freak out. And I kind of have a rule about, like, I've interviewed several actors and stuff. I don't ever name drop that, because I don't ever want somebody saying that I built whatever I build in my life off the back of somebody else. So even if it's like an act, like I interviewed 2 Oscar nominees last year that were directors. I actually don't even think I social media'd it. Because, like, I just let that fly under the radar. People can find it if they find it, right? But, like, Aaron Sorkin, who is a writer I love, I would lose my mind over. I would be way more excited about that than an A-list actor.
Yeah.
So getting back to, we'll kind of land the plane with Roseanne and then how this relates to your projects. But getting back to, like, she definitely had something to say to the world, right? AJ said that what you're doing in the horror genre is a little more like kind of back to bringing some fun to it and not having, because, like, everything now is like, it's a super demon that's going to split your soul into a million shards and torture you for all eternity. And it's like, I covered, I was trying to think about the horror movies I covered the last year, like Annabelle Creation, I really liked, but man, it's good. Really heavy. Like, it's really heavy. And when we were kids, there's a lot more like kind of comedic moments. You know, in the modern equivalent, I think the only thing I can think of is like Cabin on the Hill. Was that what it's called?
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that one.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I watched it and I was like, okay, it's scary, but it's campy. And there's not a lot of campy movies these days. But that kind of ties into, I guess, with, the way people reacting to the Roseanne thing. It's the way people also approach making their movies. Everything's got to be so serious. It doesn't have to be so serious.
Yeah, well, it's almost like the Christopher Nolan effect, and I love the Batman trilogy, but then it's like, like every kind of movie that used to be more lighthearted and the whole superhero genre taking off, it's like, well, how dark can we take this thing? Until eventually we get to, Batman versus Superman, and it's like, okay, that's too dark. Batman, right. Like branding people is so that they'll get killed in prison. It's too dark. Like, we're not into it anymore. And so maybe it's just time auto-correcting that the market's going to be ready for something that's maybe not quite so heavy.
Yeah, well, I got to noticing, and the idea, when Wes Craven died a few years ago, that was a huge blow to me. Yeah. I mean, he was my inspiration, and I wanted to come up with a way. I had been trying to figure out what I could write, what was something I could do. And nothing was just like, blowing up in my mind, like, oh my God, you have to do this. And then all of a sudden I got to feeling really nostalgic for the movies that he used to make and the movies in that genre. And in the 80s, it was the slasher. And I was like, they don't really have many characters like this anymore. Back then you had franchise possibilities and very marketable killers. Everybody knows who Michael Myers is, Freddy Krueger, and Jason Voorhees. They're like the three big ones, and it's because they became a brand. Yeah, they might have their horror factor got diminished a little bit because of it, but at the same time, they're household names. And I decided, wouldn't it be fun to create a new slasher, but not a modern slasher? What if he's the slasher of the 80s that everybody forgot about? And so Chuckles was born. And so the idea is that it takes place in 1988 in a small town in Missouri. This man has done something super terrible. He's killed a bunch of kids in the past. He's been locked away for it. And you would think that everybody would remember him, but he got overshadowed by all of these other big murder cases that were happening in the 80s. Everybody heard about the Crystal Lake murders and the Haddonfield, Illinois murders and the Springwood, Ohio murders, and everybody forgot about Chuckles the Clown. So by the time he escapes from the institution, nobody even remembers who he is. So it's not so much that he was this legend that everybody, talks about. No, for the most part, this whole little town forgot about this killer. And so he comes back and takes them by surprise. But that was just my comedic comment on it. I was like, what if there was another slasher that everybody just forgot about because all of the other big stories overshadowed him? Okay.
Is he dealing with self-esteem issues? He's like, I got to get my numbers up.
Yeah, and
they don't take me seriously.
And I built him with a little bit of all of my favorite horror characters. He's a little Freddy, he's a little Michael Myers, he's a little Jason, a little Leatherface, but the script got really good response when I got it finished. And Eileen Dietz is attached to it. She's from The Exorcist, and she's done a lot of other films in the horror genre. She loved it. She thought it hit the right notes so well. She read it and she said it's just like those old movies where it's fun. Mm-hmm. You read it and you don't have to think, and there's only one twist at the end, which usually comes with those movies. You have to have that shocker. Yeah. But I didn't want to write a movie that you had to sit there and really think about. It it's very light. It's a popcorn movie. It is formulated to be as if you were watching a movie that was made in the 1980s.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation on Twitter with a friend of mine who's also a writer and does some work as a critic, talking about Riverdale, which is the updated Archie thing. And we were just both talking about how the thing that's great about it is that it's not prestige in any way. There's really, I mean, these are just old school 50s characters. They updated, they gave it kind of a cool aesthetic. It's a whodunit, maybe with a little bit of Agatha Christie thrown in. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. You just kind of want to find out who killed the kid. And, there is no, you see the characters change and, grow as they're young adults, which is, accurate, but there is no deep theme or like thing that they're trying to, there is no piece of commentary that they're trying to really say out there. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just like at some point, okay, I'm kind of exhausted and I want to lay on the couch on a Thursday night and not think that much.
I think there needs to be more entertainment like that. There's not too many things. That's why I stopped watching TV a lot, because you couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think there is, and there is a place for, the term that I don't think we ever heard growing up was world building. And I appreciate that TV is not as dumb as it used to be, where it's just completely episodic and nothing. There is no difference between the episodes. There's no character arc. They just keep finding. It's CSI. They just keep finding the bad guy or whatever. It's like whatever. But on the other hand, it can go too far the other way, where it's like, well, this is world building for the spin-off, and it's like, well, but it wasn't a good story. I think the worst example maybe being the Terminator reboot. I loved that series as a kid, and the one with Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones, when they came back, and it was like, we had to do this movie to set up the other movies, and it's like, but nobody was that concerned about what was going on in this movie. Like, you didn't give us, so you gave us like 2 hours so that you could sell us other movies, but you didn't entertain us in this movie.
Yeah, it's like a teaser trailer. If the teaser trailer doesn't have enough, wow factor to it, why are you going to go see the movie? Yeah.
I don't know if you would put this in any horror influence on this, but it was a huge movie to me when we were kids. The Predator reboot, where they're actually taking that seriously, I'm pretty excited. Like, actually doing a good job. Yeah, it does.
At first I wasn't really sure about it, because I'm like, Jesus, you rebooted it already, because there was another Predator.
There was like a Predator versus Aliens, and
then they did a Predator with Danny Trejo in it, which I thought was supposed to be a reboot.
Okay,
but now there's a new reboot, which is fine. I mean, it happens, but it's the way Hollywood works. But I'm more excited for this one after I saw the trailer. I wasn't so sure what I was going to think of it when I heard that they were doing it, but when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
We may just have lost a large part of the audience, but I still wanted to say something about that because I was pretty pumped. Okay, so just to land the plane here, it's like, I kind of feel like, to put a bow on it, the thesis we kind of came to is like, somebody needs to be doing entertainment that's not trying to shove one point of view really, really hard, and it's just telling a story, and that story is not trying to necessarily rewrite the fabric of society in your own image. And then the other thing is, like, we both seem pretty okay with whatever voice is existing out there and things being open for the marketplace of ideas, as opposed to needing to be outraged. Because the Kathy Griffin thing you brought up, I would say that, like, maybe the thing that was stupid about it is, if you hold up the president's head, or a fake one, you are going to get the FBI knocking on your door. I mean, you got to know
right,
that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, I can be as outraged as I want. I don't even think I knew Kathy Griffin was still alive before she did that. Right, it's not like, she was a comedian that I was just counting down the days till she was coming to town. So, I mean, what does it affect me one way or the other? I would say that, I heard her tours and stuff didn't do as well after that. Like, if you do something dumb, the market's probably going to punish you.
Right.
And so, in most cases, if we would just step back and not freak out, because when you freak out, then you get the counter revolution of like, oh, well, we got to stand up for this person because this person is democracy, right? If Roseanne falls or if Kathy Griffin falls, the whole system falls apart. And then we just get another, ongoing war of words, and it gets increasingly silly. And maybe the truly dangerous thing is the more there's collective outrage, in the event that there ever needs to be legitimate outrage, why is anybody going to listen to it?
Right.
We wasted it on comedians in the late 2010s.
Yeah, I know. And one thing that I have theorized about, because, it all played out the way it was going to play out for Kathy Griffin. Yes, everybody gave her hell, but the audience decided, okay, that was a bit much. Her shows didn't do as well. I actually think that there's a fear, because it happened so fast. It was within hours and they canceled Roseanne.
Yeah.
It might be a slight fear because people were not all that thrilled that a show that had a Trump supporter as its main cast member was doing so well. And I think there might have been a fear that what if she did say this tweet, and no matter what everybody thought about it and the show went on, and what happens if it is still as successful in the next season or even more successful? Then what does that say? Yeah. Because I guarantee you that there's the majority of America are still going to tune in to watch that show even after this tweet.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, Whitney Cummings, who was a producer on it, and she did Two Broke Girls, and she had a show. I'm not really kind of into the laugh track genre normally, but she was on Joe Rogan talking about the reason she really fought to bring this back as a producer is because she realized that during the election, like, everybody thought exactly like she did, and if you have a country like that, eventually you're going to break into pieces. And so it makes me sad that like somebody tried this. It's too bad it got ruined. I just cannot imagine it's really dead.
No, I'm almost thinking that it's going to show up if it's not on Netflix, on Fox, or some other avenue. Hell, if they were really smart, the internet is there. Make it an online series.
Oh, and
no network.
That as soon as Roseanne comes back and she's like, I'm really sorry, we're doing this for the right reasons, would you subscribe for $5 a month? All the people who were counter outraged at the outrage are going to throw their credit cards down immediately.
Yeah. And I just think that there were so many missed opportunities with this. This could have been a learning curve for the entertainment industry. Yes. Yes, you did wrong. Even if it wasn't intended to be wrong, it came out wrong. It had this effect. People, it caused a lot of issues. She has a show that is watched by, so many millions of people. It's the #1 show on TV right now. It was there. You could have made that a topic. Okay, it's fine. Everybody thinks you're a racist. Let's really talk about the race issue and where you really stand on it and how you should handle the, they could have actually used this as an opportunity instead of saying, okay, bad, you're fired.
Yeah.
It's like, bad, all right, now you have to do this.
Yeah.
Because they could have done that. But
well, I guess the difference between the Samantha Bee thing, which I didn't know who Samantha Bee was. She has apparently a comedy show on TNT. I didn't know who she was before she got the show. I don't know what the show is. I just have no thoughts, right? But Roseanne hops on Twitter and says, I'm really sorry. Hopefully that, God can point me towards a way to use this for good or whatever. And like, she just talks about how, it's raw, it's unfiltered. Again, she probably, is not the most well right now and probably needs some professional assistance there. But then Samantha Bee, who drops a piece of profanity that apparently you can get on the air, but most people find very offensive, and then makes an incest joke on top of it, just puts out a statement and is like, oh, well, I'm sorry. And it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And I don't even care that you're not sorry, but I had no opinion of you before. I didn't care. Now I still don't care, but I have a less of opinion because now I know you're not honest.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because just things that I just never really think about, lately, because everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. I cannot believe that Jimmy Kimmel still has the platform that he has. What he did, the painting his face to make himself look black, that's 10 times more offensive than somebody. And this is the thing I keep pointing out. Everybody's like, oh, Roseanne called her an ape. No, she didn't call her an ape. And if anything, leave it to a movie geek to point something out to you. She said the title of a movie.
Yeah.
She didn't call her an ape. And she also, it was probably more of one of her conspiracy theory ideal, the way that she pieced it together, because, she has her viewpoints on what the Muslim Brotherhood is aiming to do. And if you've ever seen Planet of the Apes, what did the apes try to do? They turned on the humans and they took over the world. Mm-hmm. I don't actually think she was making any kind of a statement on the fact about this woman was black. I think it says Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
It is not talking about her looks. And if anything, people were pointing out to me and says, well, they said she doesn't look black to me. She just, I don't see where that's a race thing. She doesn't look black. No. I think, though, that she might have been saying something because I saw a picture of Helena Bonham Carter in the remake of Planet of the Apes. We were looking and said, maybe that's what she's talking about, because the way that her makeup was done, it made her facial structures about the same. Okay. She even kind of looks like Roseanne, the way that they had it. So I even said, nobody wanted to even look at that. I said, I don't even think that it was meant to be anything on race. I think it had to do with the whole Islamic paranoia that she's got attached to the Obama administration. I said, because if she wanted to say she looked like a monkey, I'm pretty sure Roseanne would have said she looks like a monkey.
Yeah.
She would have. That is how Roseanne is. She is not one to mince words. But nobody has looked at it from that viewpoint, and that's just my personal feeling. I'm like, I don't even think it was meant to be about her, race. I think it was the Planet of the Apes were actually meant to represent what she was talking about. It's about trying to take over the world.
I'm going to just go on record and say, if I got to pick a number, I think there's an 80% chance the show is back in some way come this fall.
I'm waiting for it. I just cannot see, not that I'm saying it's that money is, the best thing in the world, but money talks.
Yeah.
And even somebody who may not completely agree with the controversy, they're going to be like, there's money to be made here. So they're going to...
Brantley, it's been really fantastic. I really want to have you back on. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to anything else, or if what your opinion of the show is. No problem if you have it.
Well, I've been right now I'm still working part-time as a manager at Taco Bell. So for the last 3 days, that's pretty much been my life. And then I have the rest of my days, which is usually my my writing and anything involving the filmmaking part. So this is my free time, so I want to actually get to listen now.
No, it's cool. And you know what, man? I love that you just say it like that, because just a little bit of backstory on me. I was in media for about 10 years full time, then I did corporate marketing, and I started a company about a year ago. And then a couple of other things have happened. My wife and I are having kid number 1 in October, which we're super excited about, right?
Congratulations.
And then I got to be careful how I say this, because there's a class action lawsuit that's been filed. But the company my wife worked for was seized by the bank. And there's some very questionable ethical business practices. So that whole company of, I think, maybe 200 people in 4 states suddenly found themselves without a job. So I've been Ubering on the weekends because obviously our lives look different than we thought they were going to look. And it's like, people are like, oh, don't say you drive Uber. And I'm like, so what? The company is going to grow. I'm going to be at a very different place in a year than we are right now. Also, we're very, pretty fiscally conservative. We don't use credit cards and stuff like that. So this is what I'm doing, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of the fact that I have a good work ethic. And honestly, the reason I asked if we could push this back an hour is because Taylor Swift was in Chicago last night, and the rates were up to 4x. So I was making $25 and taking somebody like an 8-minute ride. And so I Facebooked you. I'm like, could I get another hour, man? I want to sleep in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that.
So I definitely want to get you back on. I think we've just scratched the surface on kind of where we could go on topics. But normally I have people shout out kind of what they're doing or how to connect, and I have different kind of people with ideas and podcasts and books on and stuff. In your case, movies take a while to get out there. So is there a way people can connect with you, see what you're doing? Or how do you roll with that?
Yeah, actually, let's see, there's 2 different movies right now that are in different stages of development, which I mentioned Chuckles. Chuckles is in the very, very early stages of pre-development. The script is locked down. We've got, 1 actor attached. We're reaching out to a few, but, we're not super far into the process. But you can find out information about that movie. There is an official Facebook page for it. It's at Chuckles Movie on Facebook, and then there's also it's on Instagram as well. I also have a profile on Talent Boom, which has a link to all of my pages. So you just go to talentboom.com, and my screen name is Brantley J. Brown, and I'm also on Instagram as Brantley J. Brown. I'm trying to use my full name as like my logo. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's why. So when I started in radio, and I actually started in country radio in Iowa, and then wound up moving over to Chicago. I wound up with the name Tower because I'm 6'6", and that way people could identify me at events, right?
Yeah.
And so I kept it as the middle name, Seth Tower Hurd, and people were like, well, why do you do that? You're not in radio anymore. Because if you Google me, you only get me, and there's not ever going to be somebody for that competition. I work in search engine optimization for my company, so it just made sense. It's like, no, I want you to find me immediately if you're looking for me.
Yes. My last project I wanted to make sure to mention, because this one's actually the most exciting, and I don't think AJ had gotten to talk to you about this one yet, because I don't even think the script was finished. But my writing partner that I mentioned, Michael Colomb, we wrote a screenplay called Del Obispo Road, and it's a real road down in Orange County in San Juan Capistrano, and supposedly the whole area is very rich in the supernatural. There's been even documentaries about the missions down there that are supposedly haunted. So it's a ghost story, but it actually has a producer attached, Edward Coupland, and he's also the star of the movie. If everything goes to plan, which it seems to be, the film is supposed to go into production in October. Oh, wow. Yeah. So that one is the really exciting project right now, just because it's so much further. We're hoping that we're going to have another meeting here very soon to find out the next steps that we're going to take, and if everything works out right, there's a chance that Michael and I, not only as writers, will get producer credit on the film as well. So we get to stay involved creatively past the script. But yeah, Del Obispo Road, we are waiting to put any kind of a social media page up for that one yet, because he wanted to make sure that we have everything signed on the dotted line. Yeah, okay. With the production company first. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that there will be a marketing team that will handle that. Because I thought we were done. Then I just have to ask one question about writing, and then we'll really be done. Because I got to go Uber, man. I got a kid coming. But Scott Derrickson, who did, he's done some horror. He did The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and then he did Doctor Strange, which I really enjoyed. I'm a little hit or miss with Marvel, but I really liked that one. He said that the biggest problem with Hollywood is that, the reason movies go bad is people who can't write telling writers how to write. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how many people can have an opinion on your scripts. And one girl who doesn't know anything about movies in general, apart from being she watches them occasionally. Mm-hmm. I was telling her, I worked with her at Taco Bell, and I was just mentioning to her, Chuckles, and she just got the most basic, and she goes, "That's so stupid. Why do you spend your time writing something like that? Nobody's going to want to see that." Well, do you write? do you make movies? I'm pretty sure there's a market for it.
I know.
You know, it's a killer clown movie, and it's set in the 80s. Right now, because of it, clowns are hot. And everybody is all about, you know, the 80s. Have you seen Stranger Things?
Okay, so we have not met, but Nancy's my step cousin.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's my stepdad's niece, and oddly enough, my family's endured a little bit of harassment, which I just think is funny. I mean, it's not that bad. It's not like we were physically threatened, but both my stepsister-in-laws and my mom, because they have the last name Dyer, have gotten like unsolicited Facebook messages saying Natalia is, you know, she obviously has an eating disorder, and she is like she's a bad influence on my daughter or whatever. And I'm like, okay, hang on, I'm just gonna pull this up on my phone so you can see my stepdad. The whole family's just naturally thin. And it's just hilarious because it's like, I don't know how these people are finding my mom. But like, here, let me zoom in and I'll hold it up. Okay, there's my stepdad. Can you just, like, he's about as thin as Natalia is.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny. Like, I don't know who it is out there. It's like, I'm watching a show and I'm going to spend 6 hours and somehow find the step aunt of that person. And I'm going to write her a letter, a strongly worded email.
Yeah, that's usually not my my goal when I'm watching a show on TV. But, you know, whatever floats someone's boat.
You know, another thing is you can also hit the back button and watch anything else on Netflix.
Yeah.
Brantley J. Brown, if you could Facebook me the Facebook message me the links so I can go ahead and get those in the description and I'll get this out.
Yes.
And I think we'll just, you know, I think I actually have to hang up to end the recording. So I'll end it right there, my friend. Would love to have you back on. And
I'd be glad to come back.
Yeah, maybe we'll be talking, maybe we'll have you on, pre-record it and do it the week the movie drops or whatever, because I think that could be pretty cool too if, you know, it's coming out in, like, hopefully, could that be out in another year after October? Or not?
Yeah, what they were hoping to have it released, they wanted a summer of 2019 release. Okay. So,
dang.
Fingers crossed.
Life's getting real.
Yeah, it is.
Savor cooking up those last few tacos because that season of life is ending.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that big ship to come in and it'd be like, okay, Taco Bell, I will eat your food, but I am done making it. I would keep ending and not ending. I'm not somebody that goes around looking for vengeance, but I would want to, like, mail that girl like a box of DVDs. Be like, I guess somebody cared. Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of fun because, you know, the more presents that I'm getting, you know, with, you know, it was so amazing, like, you know, when I became an official writer, you know, and I got my IMDb credit. Yeah. And then now I've got, you know, I'm having to create, I created a logo for myself so that, you know, it on all my email correspondence, I'm like, why do I have a logo? Huh. You know, and then now, you know, helping to design pitch decks for projects and temporary poster art and promotional poster art for some of these projects. It's just, and writing it too, it's just, this life is weird. Yeah. I always wondered what it was going to be like once I decided to try and do this. It's all just, it's bizarre, it's surreal, but it's normal life now. So well, and just wait till you get there, because, like, and I would say I've been up and down a few different times. Like, now I have a little bit of a voice out there. You know, I've got podcasts that are reaching, you know, 10,000 plus a month through various outlets, and I'm still writing. So, but when I was in radio and also doing some TV stuff in Chicago, like, it's amazing how many people show up and they're like, oh, like, they schmooze you just because they think you can get them tickets or get backstage or something like that. Yeah. And then what's really funny is, like, you know, you get out of that and then you kind of come back with something else and they show back up after 5 years and you're like, I kind of think I'm onto this. Okay, I gotta hang up so I can put this thing out. It'll be out immediately if you want to share it on your social media. All right. Brantley J. Brown, you can check out the links to his stuff in the show notes. And this is Neighbors again. Thank you for having me. All right, see you, man. See ya. Hanging up now. Bye.